For the introduction and the invitation to speak here. I mean, you are familiar that research on the historical formation of institutionalized Islam in Europe has primarily focused on two main actors in these processes: the governments of sending countries and their respective embassies in the receiving countries, so-called embassy Islam, and Islamist movements from Muslim majority countries and their transnational networks, political Islam. And research has often assumed a kind of conflictual or antagonistic relationship between these two actors in the institutional field of Islam, Islamist movements adopting a dissident stance to the governments of their countries of origin, while sort of embassy Islam trying to control Muslim minority communities, diasporic communities in various European countries. For European governments, as you're probably aware, as the previous speakers have alluded to that as well, the central role that both actors have played in organizing Islam has been perceived as being problematic. The links that Muslim minority communities still have and their organizations to their countries of origin are seen as something, sort of instruments by their countries of origin and the governments to control, to exercise control over the minority communities. Again, very recent. Shall I speak? Sorry about that. We have seen very recently a controversy of various mosques and imams associated with the Turkish Egypt and their efforts to monitor, to control Turkish minority communities in various Western European countries, sort of to identify sympathizers to the Gülen movement. And again, similarly, in particular, after the post-Arab Spring scenario, we've seen, if you like, a global anti-Islamist backlash, and again, organizations that in various ways are affiliated with political Islam, in particular with Muslim Brotherhood networks, are seen as suspicious by European governments as well. So governments have searched for alternative partners, less problematic partners, or have undertaken efforts themselves to create umbrella organizations of Muslim communities under state patronage. Now, this is all relevant. What I hope to do today in my paper is to add some complexity to these narratives. When we talk about political Islam, what I'd like to do is to show the diverse range of different actors, the realities on the ground. So there's a lot of ideological, political discourse, public framing of political Islam, to sort of investigate more the sort of the impact they have on the ground. And I want to do this by looking at regional context and also religious context that are usually overlooked in debates on organizing Islam in Europe. One regional context I would like to focus on is Eastern Europe. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Yearbook of Muslims in Europe, which is an annual publication providing an overview of developments and dynamics around the Muslim population in almost every European country. So, thanks to the great work of various contributors to the yearbook, I have a kind of a bird's eye view of what's happening across Europe. And one of the issues that have become very apparent, that since the rise to power of the AKP, Turkish governmental organizations have played a central role in organizing religious, educational, and charitable activities in Eastern Europe, restoring Ottoman monuments, for example, for Muslim communities in Eastern Europe, but also being actively involved in various activities of Muslim communities in Eastern Europe. So as such, the Turkish government has become a major actor in Eastern European Islam, using its support for various Islamic organizations as a means to extend its geopolitical soft power over the region. So there will be hopefully some time to talk about this. We already have heard about the European Council for Fatwa and Research as one of the major, if you like, intellectual outlets of global Muslim Brotherhood networks. You might not be aware, but the seat, the headquarters of the European Council for Fatwa Research are in Dublin, in the Republic of Ireland. So I'll talk a little bit about the history behind this, and again, investigating the actual local impact the Council has on Irish Muslim communities. I don't think, I wanted to talk about other networks of political Islamic movements that are usually overlooked by looking at 12 Shia networks, in particular the role of the Islamic Republic of Iran and also of Iraqi Islamist actors, in particular Hezbollah, in the British context, but I think I might be a bit too ambitious here to include all these examples. I mentioned already the distinction that sometimes is made between embassy Islam and political Islam, Islamic organizations supported, sponsors by the embassies, the governments of countries of origin, and then Islamic organizations that have a background in Islamist movements. These examples that I'd like to talk about challenge this dichotomy to a large extent. So we have the AKP, the Turkish government, as an Islamist actor being involved in extending its influence over Eastern European Islam. The European Council for Fatwa Research is, as you might know, funded by the Al Maktoum Foundation, which is a foundation run by the finance minister of the Emirates, a member of the Al Maktoum family. So again, a bit surprisingly, we have, again, the government or the ruling family or one of the Emirates involved in supporting financially the logistics of the European Council for Research. And of course, the boundaries between political Islam and governments of Islamic governments become even more blurred when we talk about the role that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been playing across Europe, and also when we talk about Iraqi Shia Islamist actors such as the Hezbollah. But again, I don't think I will have time to talk about this. I think the point, and again, my previous speakers have already emphasized this as well, is that we want, there is obviously there have been efforts by European governments to domesticate Islam, to promote moderate forms of Islam, trying to marginalize Islamic political actors or movements that have an Islamist background to create Euro-Islam, British Islam, Republican Islam, and so on. However, and I'm sure there would be more or less a consensus about this issue here in this room, the transnational dimension is very important, and again, previous speakers have mentioned this already. All these networks, these organizations with their transnational links retain important connections to their countries of origin. The context of origins is important if we want to understand the historical, ideological, and social formations of these networks. But in addition to that, without being too simplistic here, these organizations also retain a strong diasporic orientation. Diasporic, not in the sense as kind of a longing for the homeland, but an orientation to, again, very broadly defined, to another place and another time. Not necessarily the country of origin, but also a connection, an imagined or emotive felt connection to a global Islamic world. Now, the first case study that I would like to investigate is the role that Turkish governmental organizations have played in the Islamic field in Eastern Europe. Now, Eastern Europe is obviously a very interesting case because when we talk about Muslim minorities in Eastern Europe, we are not talking about communities that have emerged as a consequence of migration, but about communities that have a long established historical presence, have been there for centuries as a result of being part of the sort of the historical Ottoman realm. So issues of integration, migration, cultural differences and so on, all these issues that have been raised by the previous speakers and also in the introduction to the conference are not necessarily relevant for Muslim minorities in the Eastern European context. Interestingly as well, institutionally, Eastern European Muslim communities have quite centralized structures of Islamic organizations, reflecting again to a certain extent the Ottoman heritage. So in all Eastern European countries, or Southern Eastern European countries, you have central Islamic organizations that sometimes receive funding from the government, and they're headed by a mufti, another title is Rais al-Ulama, or by a Sheikh al-Islam. These official Islamic community organizations entertain at the same time various links to the governments of Muslim majority countries, and also within their own countries often compete with organizations and movements, transnational movements, that are independent of the centralized Islamic community. Now, we are aware that Diyanet, as one of the branches of the Turkish government, is particularly responsible for catering for the religious, educational, spiritual needs of Turkish Muslim communities in Western Europe. And also, there is a large Turkish minority in Bulgaria, so there are obviously strong links there. And there is a certain division of labor, so Diyanet is responsible for Turkish diasporic communities. Another branch, another agency of the Turkish government is TİKA, the Turkish International Cooperation and Coordination Agency, which has been involved in a variety of activities in the Islamic field in Eastern Europe. In terms of restoring monuments, historical mosques of the Ottoman period in countries such as Kosovo or Macedonia. TİKA has been constructing community centers such as a major Islamic cultural center in Montenegro. TİKA sponsors religious events, iftar dinners, receptions at major religious celebrations. And has also been supporting the establishment and construction of education institutions, such as a girls' unit of the Mehmet Fatih Madrasa in Montenegro. In addition, TİKA has been involved in humanitarian relief. Parts of former Yugoslavia were affected by severe floods in 2014 and 2015, and again, TİKA was one of the major players, assisting the local communities in supporting villages and again Muslim majority areas affected by these floods. So there are these various things. They have, and again, one anecdotal example. There is in Poland, for example, a very small historical Tatar cemetery. So a burial place for Tatar Muslims that have been living in Poland for many years. The cemetery, historically, is now managed by the Turkish government, the maintenance and so on. So again, it's something that requires much more research and illustrates how Turkey has become a major player. Obviously, there has been a competition between Turkish government agencies and networks associated with the Gülen movement, and certainly after the failed coup attempt in 2016, the Turkish government has exercised quite a lot of pressure on Islamic communities in Eastern Europe to sever their links to various educational initiatives associated with the Gülen movement. But they have not been very successful in doing this, with a few exceptions. Now, the second example I would like to talk about is the European Council for Fatwa and Research, and we had already an introduction to this organization earlier on. Now, the headquarters of the Islamic Council for Fatwa Research are in Dublin at the premises of the Islamic Cultural Centre of Ireland, which is the largest mosque in Ireland. Again, the history, I mean, again, it's a bit surprising, it was very surprising for Muslims in Ireland as well, that the centre, the headquarter of this institution would be in Dublin. Now, the history is quite interesting. Ireland has a fairly small Muslim population. At the moment, it's probably 65,000. I mean, small Ireland is obviously Republic of Ireland is a small country as well, 3 million. And in the early 90s, I mean, it has grown significantly in the last 20 years. In the early 1990s, there were probably just 4,000 Muslims living in Ireland. And quite different to other Western European countries, there were quite well-educated, middle, upper-class students, educated professionals. And they established a school, which was partially funded by the government, and also were seeking support to build a major mosque. And there were medical students from the Emirates that approached the Al Maktoum family and the Al Maktoum Foundation to support the construction of a major mosque in the capital. The centre was opened in 1996. The President of Ireland was part of the inauguration, and also the deputy ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid Al Maktoum, being there as well. Now, the Maktoum Foundation has been sponsoring the construction of this mosque. Quite interestingly, at the same time, they supported the neighbouring Twelver-Shi community in the construction of their own community centre in the same year. And the headquarter of the European Council for Further Research was based in Dublin. Probably different considerations here. One was sort of practical logistical, because the Secretary General of the European Council for Further Research, Sheikh Hossein Halawa, is also the Imam of the Islamic Cultural Centre. So again, there was a sense having the kind of operative centre in Dublin makes sense. We provide the upkeep of this particular mosque. The Secretary General is the Imam of this mosque, so it sort of works and helps. I think another consideration was more political, because Qaradawi, as we've already heard, is a very prominent and also very controversial figure. I'm not quite sure, maybe Tahir would know better. I think there's a travel ban in the UK, or I don't know whether it's so, or there was. So again, if the European Council for Further Research would meet in London or in Paris or in Rome, for that matter, there would be huge, media coverage and interest in this. In Dublin, nobody cares. I think when they have meetings, maybe a couple of Dutch journalists show up and sort of besiege the mosque, because in Ireland, nobody is really interested or that concerned about this issue. So again, it's easier in a sense for the council to operate with the headquarter there. Now, what is very interesting, the Islamic Cultural Centre of Ireland has been very, very successful in representing Islam to the Irish public. So this is sort of the go-to organisation for the government, the Irish government, and also for the wider public. And again, they have been quite successful in terms of claiming a monopoly in terms of the public representation of Islam. Again, this has been a bit contested recently. Now, what is quite interesting is, despite the success of the mosque in representing Islam in the public, as a branch of political Islam, they have been challenged by different factions. So you have Muslim community leaders in the local context that point at the brotherhood connections of the council and the Imam to, again, delegitimize their authority in the public arena. And you have also pressure from Salafi Muslims in Ireland, putting pressure on Halawa and the mosque to ensure that the type of Islam that is promoted by the mosque does not deviate too much from Salafi interpretations of Islam. So, for example, Hossein Halawa is Egyptian by background. Milad Nabi is obviously an important element of Egyptian Islamic culture. He was invited by Sufi imam to attend a conference with different imams of different Muslim islands, celebrating Milad al-Nabi. He was severely criticized by Salafi members of his community. I had to do a public defense during the Friday midday sermon khutbah, saying why Milad al-Nabi is not bid'ah and why it is permissible to celebrate this. Another very interesting example, looking at the actual impact that the European Council for Fatwa Research is a controversy that occurred in 2010 about the length of the month of Ramadan. Again, we have already heard controversies around it. Now, the European Council for Fatwa and Research uses astronomical calculations to determine the end, the beginning and the end of Ramadan. So, again, the argument is obviously that it is easier for Muslims to know exactly when Eid is, to sort of plan their own holidays and so on. The mosque in Dublin, the Islamic Culture Centre, issued a calendar with the times for Ramadan, the prayer times, and followed the ruling of the European Council, saying, fasting is for 29 days, without officially confirming the date of Eid. So they didn't say Eid will be then, but it was clear that they would follow the guidance of the Islamic Council. Now, the night before, appearing to be traditional, they announced tomorrow will be Eid. And there was a huge backlash then from various Salafi communities saying, no, this it's better, we can't do it this way. And the Islamic Culture Center was forced to retract, and a few hours later sent out another message saying, no, we have actually to fast another day, Eid will be the day after tomorrow. And again, it's a sort of trivial example, but it illustrates how around these, if you like, more symbolic issues, Islamic political actors do not necessarily have the influence, the impact on local communities, and are often squeezed between different actors within local communities under pressure by Salafis, and also, if you like, by liberal, Sufi-oriented Muslim leaders who, again, in terms of jockeying for authority, would point at the brotherhood links of certain actors. I mean, very briefly, in the end, just again to add further complexity to the networks and the actors in terms of political Islam in Europe, I want to talk about maybe just one example, Shia Islamist networks. I mean, in London is one of the global hubs of transnational Shia Islam. You have, particularly in the northwest of London, around 20 Shia community centers representing the different factions within contemporary Shia Islam. The major clerical authorities have offices representing their interests. You have Hizb Dawah with a community center, other political actors. And one of the largest centers is the Islamic Center of England, which is the official representation of the Supreme Leader of Iran in the UK. And you can already see with the title, the Islamic Center of England, there is a kind of territorial claim associated with the center. This is the center. This should be the main reference point for Muslims, or at least Shia Muslims, living in the UK. Now, as you probably know, the Iranian diaspora in the UK, as primarily Western countries with very large numbers, is quite secular, if not anti-Islamic, because most of them would have come after the Islamic Revolution. So the actual local constituency for which the Islamic Cultural Center of England would care, would cater for, is very, very small. And therefore they broaden their appeal. So they offer programs in Persian, as one would expect, in Arabic and in Urdu and in English. And it's one of the very few centers that caters in particular for the needs of converts to Shia Islam. All the other centers have very often a very strong ethnic component, so they're Iraqi, they're Lebanese. So for Western converts to Shia Islam, it's very difficult to fit in. The Islamic Center of England is the only center that provides, if you like, systematic and sustained sort of mentoring programs for converts, again, to give them a sense of community. So again, within the sort of Iranian Shia diaspora, they're not very effective, so they try to reach out to other communities. But even among religious devout or practicing Iranian Shia Muslims, the Islamic Center is not necessarily very successful. So we have a couple of initiatives in branch of, again, Iranian Shia Muslims who are practically not secular, but they don't want to use the facilities of the Islamic Center to organize their own religious activities because they feel uncomfortable working with them. They are also very conscious that it would put certain limitations in terms of the kinds of activities they can do, the kinds of speakers they can invite, and also there's a desire to reach out to segments of the Iranian Shia diaspora in the West, or in the UK here in particular, or in London, that want to sort of rediscover their Shia roots, but again would not like to go to a community center that is sponsored by the Iranian government. So again, we have here an actor that claims a representative status, but again it's contested by different actors in the local field, and also facing all sorts of challenges in reaching out to the local community. So again, 3 examples to add some further complexity to the debate on political Islam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.